Welcome everyone to this month's webinar, Sexuality, Intimacy, and Parkinson's. My name is Donna Greening, and I'm a Programs and Services Coordinator at Parkinson Canada. During today's webinar, our expert speaker will discuss tools and tips for maintaining a sexual and/or intimate relationship, sexual challenges for people with Parkinson's, including erectile issues, vaginal dryness, and pain, maintaining and expanding emotional and physical intimacy, and communicating about sexuality with one's partner and healthcare professionals. Before we begin, there are a few items I want to go over. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territories of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples. To access closed captioning, click on the CC Live Transcript button and then click on Show Subtitle. If you'd like to submit a question for our presenter, be sure to write it in the Q&A window. The chat window is there for you to say hello and talk amongst yourselves. Rest assured that any questions submitted by you when you registered or those entered into the Q&A window will be posed anonymously. Before we begin, we're going to share a video message from our President and CEO, Dr. Karen Lee.
Over 100,000 Canadians live with Parkinson's. We have one of the highest rates in the world. My name is Karen Lee. I'm the CEO of Parkinson Canada. My late grandfather lived with Parkinson's disease, and I know very well the importance of family and how they have to come together to support one another, but most importantly, the person living with Parkinson's. That is why I am dedicated and committed to ensuring Parkinson Canada continues to empower those living with Parkinson's. Each year, our programs and services reach over 10,000 people. We are a community. We are here not only for the person living with Parkinson's, but their family, friends, and their care network to ensure we all continue to thrive. Our advocacy efforts are focused on raising the voices of people affected by Parkinson's. Our Parkinson Advisory Council is made up of people affected by Parkinson's from across the country. They bring a diverse background and experience, but most importantly, they provide me and the organization with advice on topics that are important to them and their community. As a scientist, I know the importance of investing in bold and novel ideas that lead to breakthrough discoveries. At the same time, bringing researchers, clinicians, and people living with Parkinson's to collaborate to push the needle in our understanding of Parkinson's disease. We invest in the next generation of researchers and clinicians to ensure that we continuously understand the Parkinson's disease and also the care management of people affected by Parkinson's. When I'm in the community, I want people to know that Parkinson Canada is with them in every step of their journey with Parkinson's disease. People often ask, when is the right time to connect with Parkinson Canada? Is it when they have their first diagnosis? Is it when their symptoms get worse? Or is it when they need more information and resources? The answer is now. Researchers and clinicians are working tirelessly to find a cure. Meanwhile, every single day, 25 more Canadians are diagnosed with Parkinson's. Our goal is to empower people affected by Parkinson's to live well now.
Now let's get started. Dr. Sheila Silver is a board-certified clinical sexologist in private practice in Portland, Oregon. She has a master's degree in marriage, family, and child therapy, and a doctoral degree in human sexuality. She is a trained sex counselor, group facilitator, and sex educator, and acts as a consultant to mental health professionals, medical doctors, and physical therapists on their cases relating to sexuality with a specific expertise in Parkinson's disease. Dr. Silver was an invited speaker at the World Parkinson's Congress in Portland, Oregon in 2016 and Kyoto, Japan in 2019. Welcome, Dr. Silver.
Thank you so much, Donna. It's so great to be here. I love talking to Parkinson's patients and their care partners and just talking about how to expand closeness and pleasure and connection. So that's what I'm going to be about today with you. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen so you can see the slides that I've got ready for you. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. So I want us to just start and let you know what we're going to be covering today so that you kind of get a sense of what I'm going to be talking about. Of course, I could be talking for a very long time about this topic. So in some ways, I'm going to see how much I can cover in an hour with you. But I really want to leave time for questions as well. So I'm going to do my very best to cover as much of this as we possibly can. I'm going to begin by talking about just the sexual challenges for people with Parkinson's. So for folks who have been newly diagnosed or have encountered sexual issues, they may not have even realized that this is a normal part of what people experience, both sometimes through aging, but also specifically with Parkinson's. And we're also going to be talking quite a bit about broadening our definitions of sex. So there's a way in which, for many folks, they see sex in a very narrow way. And as we age and as we have health challenges, including Parkinson's, we really need to broaden the way we think about sex, because that's the way that we keep adapting it for what we can do, for what we're interested in, for what we have the energy for. I'm also going to be talking about how to have brave, kind conversations about sexuality and intimacy with your partner if you are partnered. These kinds of conversations, sometimes we've never needed to really have before, or we've been embarrassed or shy about having some of these conversations. But it's really what helps us create a really quality experience with our partner. And so I think we just need a little coaching sometimes, or a few tips. And I'm going to offer some of that for you today. And then we're going to be talking about emotional intimacy, because sometimes people feel like if I don't feel emotionally connected to my partner, then it's hard to move into a sensual or sexual experience. So this feels like an important thing for me to cover today. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about desire, definitely with fatigue, with different challenges around our motor abilities. That can drastically impact how much desire we have to be sexual. So I want to cover that just briefly today. And then I want to talk about how to talk with healthcare professionals. I'm not a medical doctor, so there's probably many questions you have that are really better for your neurologist or other healthcare professionals who are medical professionals. My expertise is in sexuality and emotional intimacy. And so that's what I'm going to be focused on today. Okay. I want to also remind you that there's a lot of people on this call. There's almost 250 people, maybe more, and then lots of people who are going to see this after I've done it live. So we're a diverse community, right? There's lots of different ages of people, different stages of the disease. Some people are partnered, others are single, different lengths of relationship that we're in, if we're in a relationship at all, different sexual orientations. So I want you to know that my talk is for everyone. I'm trying to include everybody from every perspective as best I can. And I want you to know that you're part of it, whoever you are, from wherever you're coming from. I want you to feel included. I want you to feel free to ask questions about your particular situation. And I want you to know that that's the lens with which I'm speaking from and I'm trying to talk through. And then, of course, different people have different sexual patterns. And so some people haven't had sex in a long time. Some people rarely have sex. Some people are not having sex at all. And some people have an active sexual life. And so some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, you won't be able to relate to, and other things you absolutely will. So I just want you to appreciate that we've got a lot of different folks here on this call. And I'm hoping to include as many as possible. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is the things that I'm experiencing sexually, are those things related to Parkinson's in particular, or is this just a normal part of aging? And often sexual issues are definitely related to both medications and our abilities as we're navigating the disease. But what's also true is that sexual challenges is a normal part of aging. And so in some ways, you don't really know, maybe I would be struggling with these issues even if I didn't have Parkinson's. And so often what I'll say to patients and their partners is, on some level, maybe it doesn't matter. It's certainly worth bringing up with your neurologist. Could this be related to my medications, why I'm feeling this way? But at the end of the day, we just need to keep working on having tools and strategies to work with what we're experiencing. Okay, so let's just summarize what are some of the challenges. Many of these things you may already be familiar with, but for folks who want to sort of see it in print right in front of them, here we go. Reduced desire and energy due to fatigue and depression and medications is a common challenge that people with Parkinson's experience. Men often struggle with getting or keeping their erections or reaching their orgasm, being able to ejaculate. That's very common. Women experience dryness and pain because the walls of their vagina often are thinning as a result of aging. But they also may just have difficulty finding their orgasm related to fatigue, maybe related to depression, related to aging. It could be a whole variety of reasons. That slowness of movement, tremor, that rigidity that comes with Parkinson's, all of those things affect sex. And then cognitive changes sometimes changes the way someone shows up sexually. That, of course, makes sense. Other things that impact sexuality that I wanted to make sure you were aware of, they may seem obvious, but it's worth stating them. Self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about whether our partner perhaps is still attracted to us, or this can happen obviously as our bodies are changing and our abilities are changing, but it also can happen related to Parkinson's, related to aging, related to all of those things that happen to us as humans. Depression, of course, is a common experience of folks with Parkinson's. That inability to read nonverbal cues from partners to their partners. So in other words, if I'm a partner of somebody who has Parkinson's and they have a lot of facial masking, we often can't read the expression on their face sometimes. And we often communicate our desire for sex or interest in being sexual through our face and through really subtle nonverbal things. People with Parkinson's struggle with that because of the facial masking. So that can sometimes make it hard for couples to communicate in a nonverbal way. Memory or cognitive changes can affect how we show up. Of course, our communication difficulties and talking more softly, as is typical for Parkinson's patients, or just not being able to understand your partner sometimes, or being just uncomfortable having these kinds of conversations that maybe we didn't need to talk much about sex when we were younger or prior to diagnosis. But now that we're having more challenges, we have to have those more explicit conversations, and it can feel uncomfortable and awkward and hard. And we sometimes avoid those conversations. So I'll be speaking more about that. Body image, obviously that makes sense that might show up. Desire differences, that's something that's just perpetual and inherent in two people being together. We have desire differences in so many different aspects of our lives. Who wants to travel more and who wants to travel less? Who wants to keep the house clean and who doesn't care so much about how tidy it is? And who wants to be sexual more and who doesn't want to be asexual? So I want to really normalize desire differences, and for you to understand that it's not pathological or doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. It's a matter of inviting a conversation, just like we talk about some of those other ways in which we have differences in desire of how much we want something or don't want something. It requires some communication, which is why I'm going to be talking more about that. Distractibility, this was something that one of my Parkinson's patients was talking to me about. This was somebody who was dating somebody and they noticed that they were super distracted sometimes during sexuality, and their partner was like, what's this about? Why aren't you focused on me? And it was very much related to their Parkinson's. And so it was another thing that they needed to talk about. And then role changes. I'll be talking more about that. But When we are a patient, when we have health challenges, when we're taking care of someone we love who's got some health issues, it changes our relationship, it impacts it. And so there's a way it also impacts sexuality. Okay, so sexual challenges for the partners of people with Parkinson's. This is just important for you all who are the patient to be aware that if you're in a relationship with somebody, that your partner has their own fear and anxiety, possibly depression or grief around what the two of you are navigating. They may have their own fatigue because they're taking on more responsibilities. They have their own feelings about being in that care partner role, that wasn't really something that they had hoped to be necessarily. It's what you do when you're in a marriage or a long-term relationship, but they may have some of their own feelings about that. And we talked about being less able to read nonverbal cues. And then sometimes we just feel less emotionally connected to our partner as a result of, the person with Parkinson's has so much that they need to sort of be aware of, particularly as the disease progresses. They need to be aware of what they're eating and their exercise and their appointments with various healthcare professionals. And so there's a way in which some of that sort of medical stuff and self-care things can really create more distance in a relationship. That's a very normal, in the bell curve kind of experience. But I think it's just important that we all understand and are realizing that that's a factor too, in terms of struggling sometimes to want to feel sexual if you feel more emotionally disconnected from your partner. So when I think about the questions that I get asked often that are sexual in nature, it's related to the fact that Parkinson's is a neurological disease, as you know, and so it affects so many aspects of our being. It controls, there's nerves that are connected to our sexual organs. And so there's a way in which anything that you might be experiencing sexually, because there's nerves attached, is Parkinson's maybe impacting that experience. And so to just know that, to just assume that, instead of thinking, could this be related to my Parkinson's, given that it's a neurological disorder, a disease, and it's a progressive disease, you need to understand that it's likely to be related to any sexual issues that you may be having. Of course, they also may be things that would be happening anyway because of aging and tiredness and all kinds of things. But it's important to realize that medicines used specifically to treat Parkinson's also sometimes have an effect on sexual function. And these kinds of questions are really important to ask your doctor. I'm experiencing this. Could it be related to the medications that I'm on? So I titled this slide the most important slide of all. And the reason I say that is because it's my invitation to you to think about a sexual experience with a partner as a buffet of different things that we could potentially do that are pleasurable, that are connecting, that are body oriented in some way. It might be just being naked together, but it's something that you would do with somebody that you're a lover with, that bonds you and connects you and creates pleasure. If you see it as a very limited thing, like it's intercourse and everything else is extra and peripheral, then there's a way in which if intercourse, or if you only see it as orgasm, then there's a way in which if you struggle with that, if you don't have the energy for that, if for whatever reason your body is not on board with that, then you lose your ability to feel like you can be sexual, and it affects your self-esteem and how you see yourself as a person. And so the advantage of really broadening the way you think about sexuality is it broadens what you can bring to the table in terms of being with your partner. If let's say erections are challenging for you, then that's maybe not one of the menu items that's, that you're going to be using if erections are not something that come easy or stay around. Medications sometimes work for some folks, but for some folks, they don't. And so the conversation to have with your partner is to say, what are the things that we like to do? Sometimes those things are all available. Sometimes I don't have the energy for this, but I have the energy for that. And so what we have to do is really think about, what is our buffet? Do we need to expand our buffet? And can we call it a successful experience if we both had some pleasure and we feel more connected and intimate with each other, regardless of what actually happened? So here I say, basically, you need to view sex as an opportunity for shared pleasure and connection with no goal. If there's something that you particularly want to have, like an orgasm or to have penetrative sex of some sort, great, but that may not be an option. And if we get too focused on a goal, then there's a way in which we're not focused on our own bodies and our partner's bodies. We're just zeroed in on a particular destination. So my invitation to the people that I work with who have Parkinson's and their partners is, let's broaden the way we think about all of this. So this may be what our sex looks like today. It may be relaxing touch. It may be making out with each other. It may be sensual touch that includes our genitals or doesn't include our genitals. It may be a lingering embrace. It may be being naked with each other. There's a whole handout of menu items that I'm going to make available to you, so that if you're sort of thinking, what else might we do? How do we broaden our sexual experience? There are probably things you've already thought of, but they may not be things that you've thought of in terms of, well, that's not really sex, and that's not really sex, and that's not really sex. And so my invitation to you is, yeah, let's make all of it a way to be close and connected. Because if you cling to a very narrow definition of sex, and that's challenging, you don't have the energy or your body's not behaving in the way you wish it would, then all of a sudden being sexual, there's nothing that you can do. And that's why often couples fall apart sort of emotionally. There's a lot of distance. There's a lot of distance physically, and you feel more like roommates instead of close connected folks and partners and lovers. And so to me, if you broaden the way you think about things we could do together, and you make anything a destination, anything counts, then all of a sudden there's all kinds of things open to you, and you can be with your partner without it leading to something else. You can just make almost anything a destination, but it requires a conversation. It requires you to say to your person, hey, this is what would sound really yummy to me today. How about if we do this? Maybe it would lead to something else. Maybe it wouldn't. Who knows? But the point is to say, this is what sounds good to me. This is what I think I have the energy for. And all of a sudden you're doing something rather than avoiding. Okay. So practical solutions, those are always super handy. Lubricants, obviously lube is a way to help women who have dry vaginas now to feel more comfortable and have penetration, whether it's with fingers or a penis or whatever, more comfortable. So lubricants are great. Satin sheets that are slippery make movement more easy for people with Parkinson. So that's great. Not waiting until bedtime is another good tip, because often we associate being sexual right before we go to sleep. And for many people, that's a horrible time to be sexual because we're super tired. So planning an intimacy date in the middle of the day, or when you feel like your medications are on and you're at your best, that's a great time to plan some close time, some intimate time. Even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, it doesn't always have to be a big thing, but scheduling it and saying, hey, how about if we have some intimate time on Thursday, on Saturday afternoon? I know there's a little window here. If you kind of plan it, there's benefits. Now, people will sometimes argue with me and say, well, it takes away the spontaneity of things. And I say phooey for that. Like, there's this notion that spontaneity is so awesome. And yes, something happening spontaneously is fun, but you can't always rely on that. And it's also a way in which, if it's planned, then I can look forward to it and I can start thinking about, ooh, what might I want to wear? What might I want to do? Or what do I want to have happen? And how can I set myself up for success when we do it? I think of, planning a party or going out. Those are things that are often on our calendars, having fun with a friend. And we don't say, oh, it's not going to be so much fun because it's on my calendar. It's still fun. And so I think things can still be fun, even if they're planned, and they're way more likely to happen if they're planned. Now, something that sometimes people say to me is, well, if it's planned and then Thursday afternoon rolls around or Saturday morning rolls around and I'm not in the mood, and I'll be talking more about that in a moment, then that makes me nervous. But what I think is, all you have to show up with is a willingness to start somewhere with any small destination in mind. I think oftentimes many of us don't show up in the mood, but we can maybe do some preparation in advance to be ready for that experience, or we can just have smaller expectations and still have a lovely experience with our person. Of course, erection medications are things that can be helpful. For some folks, that really helps, and for other folks, that doesn't help. What I can tell you about erection medications is that people with Parkinson's have a slower gut movement, so that things move through their gut at a slower rate. And so in particular, things like Viagra, Cialis, those things have to be taken way earlier than the average person who doesn't have Parkinson's. And so sometimes people who prescribe those medications don't realize that about Parkinson's patients. They sometimes need several hours in advance. So sometimes when Parkinson's patients say to me, oh, those medications don't work for me, I often say, well, when did you take them? Because if you haven't taken them, I would try it out, like do some experiments. What if I take it an hour before? What if I take it an hour and a half before I want to have an experience? What if I take it 2 hours? To sort of get a sense of, is that really true that it may not be working for you? Or have you not just given it enough time to start moving through your system? So that's something to be really aware of. And then exploring ways to pleasure each other, even if the erection's not there. I have lots of patients who have had prostate cancer and have their prostate removed so that they can't get erections at all. And there's still a way in which they can orgasm. There's still a way in which they can experience pleasure. The pleasure and the amount of stimulation they can receive is different with an erect penis or not. But even still, there's no reason to just completely avoid a penis, even if it's soft. Lots of men can really enjoy pleasure. So that might be something to explore with your partner. And being patient, both with yourself and your partner, when you're being sexual is so important. So knowing that it might take you longer to get aroused, A, because you're older, or maybe B, because you've got a lot of fatigue that particular day, or your motor symptoms are particularly active that particular day. So that would be normal that it may take you longer, and to just be patient with that and give yourself plenty of time and recognize that your partner probably loves pleasuring you. And so it's okay to take the time that you need. And you also might want to let go of the orgasm part if it just seems like it's longer than you want to take, and you want to choose something different off of your menu of different things that you guys can do that feel good and pleasurable and enjoyable. I have here, remember to include your thoughts in arousal, not just your body. So often we rely just on stimulation, and it's harder to get aroused without including our brains. So our brains are definitely something that feeds our sexual experience and feeds our arousal. And what I mean by that is even just anticipating, if you think about when you were dating, or, when you think about other experiences, when you're looking forward to something, when you can't wait, there's a way in which it helps you get aroused. It's not just how much stimulation you receive, it's that anticipation. And sometimes remembering how much other experiences you've had with your partner, or things that are fun fantasies for you, thinking about those things fuel. I think of it like kindling on a fire. It fuels your arousal. So I think it's important to use your brain as well as your body when you're trying to find more arousal. And then I have here, enjoy where you are rather than focusing on where you want to go. So I spoke about that a little earlier, and it's important to come back to that thought. Sometimes when we get super focused on what we want next or what we hope will happen, then it takes us away from the experience. Particularly when we're struggling with our own body and what it's not doing, there's a way in which we get frustrated, which takes us out of the experience. So my suggestion to you would be, just be with where you are. Just notice the hands of your partner on your skin and how that feels, how it feels to have them kiss you and touch you in the ways that you like, asking for things that you want to be different, and just being right here, right now. When we get distracted, when we look to the next thing that we're going to do, there's a way in which we're not even present. So it's a mindfulness practice, and it's a way of being patient with ourselves and just being right here and present. That really enhances our sexual experience. So I talked a little bit about this idea of transitioning into sensuality and sexuality. And for many of us, we need this, what I'm calling bridging time, or this transition time to, we've just been, at work, or we've just been watching TV, or we've been on our computer, or we've been doing the dishes, or whatever we've been doing. We can't flip a switch all of a sudden and just be, okay, now I'm feeling sexual. Like that's too much to ask of ourselves. And so for many of us, we need that bridging time. Not everybody. Like, there are some people who can literally, okay, I'm in bed, I'm ready, and that's great. But that's not a reasonable expectation for all of us. Many of us need this buffer of time. And sometimes it's alone time. For many of us, it's alone time to kind of get our physical energy ready for this. Maybe it's having a bath, or putting some lotion on our bodies, or just, listening to some music, or whatever it might be. I think I give you a list here on this page of ideas for what you could do that kind of help you transition to this intimate time that you want to have. All of this helps you when you do that planning I was talking about. So Saturday morning rolls around and you're like, well, I'm not in the mood. Here's your list. Like, here are some of the things that might help you move into that experience. It may be not something that you need to do alone. Maybe it's something you need to do with your partner. Maybe you just need to have a sweet, loving conversation with them before you can move into sensuality or sexuality. So sometimes people like this bridging time on their own, and sometimes people like it with their partner. But either way, it's important to realize that some of us, this helps support us being willing and open to be vulnerable, to be wanting to take our clothes off, to want to go into that really vulnerable place of being with our partner in sexuality. So let's talk a little bit about communication. When one of you has Parkinson's, it helps to have conversations about intimacy in a loving, kind, and sort of matter-of-fact way. It's not about blaming anybody. It's not about criticism. It's not you're the problem. It's sort of sitting beside your person and looking at our problem and saying, okay, how do we maneuver this? How do we manage this? And I don't know ways of doing it other than having open conversations, as hard as it may be. So what I want you to know is I get it. For me, talking about sexuality is simple. I do it every day, and I've been doing it for years, but for most people, that is not true. It's just not true. It can be embarrassing. It can be awkward. We can be afraid we're going to hurt our partner's feelings. We feel uncomfortable using words like vagina or penis or whatever, and for some of us, our intimacy issues or our sexuality issues have nothing to do with Parkinson's. They predate our diagnosis. Like maybe we've had sexual issues for a long time in our relationship, or things that we just haven't quite talked through. But now that one of us has Parkinson's, now it feels like more of an issue. Now we feel like we really need to talk about this. So often Parkinson's sort of highlights something that may be pre-existing in a relationship, but it was easy to avoid it or not talk about it. Whereas now a conversation needs to be had. And sometimes it's just easier. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Let's just avoid it for now. And so there's a way in which, if we can be brave enough to have these kinds of conversations, then we can create a better sexual experience. So the idea is to hold the intention that we want to be closer. We need to speak in an undefended sort of way. Undefended meaning, yeah, I am feeling less desire. And it's not about you. I'm just not as plugged into my sexual energy at this point in my life, or today, or this week, or in this phase of my life, because I'm super stressed with work or family stuff or whatever it may be. We need to be able to be vulnerable in these conversations and say, I'm struggling with this, or I'm feeling embarrassed about this. I'm wondering how it's affecting you. I'm wondering if there's a way we can try to solve this or navigate around it together. That takes intimacy, right? To have those kinds of conversations and to be able to listen to somebody's experience with curiosity. Wow. So you're feeling like this whole experience is all about me and you're not feeling included. Okay, instead of me being defensive about that, that's not the way it is. Instead being, wow, so I'm really interested in how am I conveying that to you? What could I be doing differently? Because I don't want you to feel like it's all about me, our interaction. I don't want you to feel like it's not a mutual thing. So how do we do this in a way that creates a win-win, that makes us feel like both of us are getting what we enjoy and want, even if it looks different? Like maybe orgasm is really important to you and it's not so important to me, and that's okay. Or for you, touching genitals sounds really yummy to you and you want that. I don't really want that right now or today. And so here's what I really would like. I would love for you to just hold me, or just put your hands on my heart, or to just run your hands really slowly along my body. That sounds really beautiful. Or along my face. So sharing our ideas rather than complaints. This isn't working. I don't like this. You're doing this wrong. Like all of that kind of blaming stuff is a conversation killer, really, because anybody who's going to hear communication in that way is going to be like, well, wait a second, I don't do that, or I don't agree with that. And then it becomes a fight. And many times couples have a lot of difficult conversations around sexuality, which makes them less interested or more reluctant to have those conversations. And that's why having a professional, either a sex therapist or a sexologist, help you navigate that conversation can be so helpful. I've worked with folks, one session is sometimes all they need, or a couple of sessions. And I know that many sex therapists, if you don't have one in your area, they sometimes do telemedicine and can do it via Zoom or some other format. So I would really encourage you, if you're wanting to have a conversation, and those have been difficult conversations for you and your partner up till now, is to bring a third person in who can help navigate that and help you guys hear each other so that you can create this win-win that I'm describing. Other communication tips, ask about a good time to talk about this. So many times when we want to bring up something difficult, one person brings it up at a totally wrong time. And you wouldn't necessarily know that, but some people don't want to have these kinds of conversations while we're driving in the car. Or some people don't want to have these conversations while I'm about to fall asleep or while I'm about to go to work. So choosing your time, there's some time. I want to talk to you about some things. When's a good time? When do you feel like you can be focused and listen and we can have a good conversation? So planning a good time to talk, not talking about it necessarily in the bedroom. That's that matter of fact thing that I was talking about earlier, of just saying, we need to talk about what we're going to eat for dinner tonight. We need to talk about where we're going on vacation. And we need to talk about our sexual life and to try to have the same sort of energy around all of those topics. We need to talk about these things and to bring some vulnerability. Here's where I'm feeling insecure. Here's where I'm struggling. Here's where I'm holding some fear or worry, and deciding together to just take one small step. What's one little thing that we could do? This may feel like a big problem to us, but what's one little thing that could help? Sometimes I'll ask couples that question. So I hear what you're experiencing. I hear what you're feeling. Each of you, give me an idea of one small step that might help you guys. And often people can come up with those things pretty easily. And so that's sometimes the best thing. Instead of trying to tackle the whole problem, sometimes one small doable step makes all the difference. So I'm giving you some examples here of how to start some of these brave conversations. And often I encourage people to talk about things they like and things that are working before they talk about the challenges. So my favorite way you touch me, like, what a lovely thing. I would love my partner to say, my favorite thing that you do for my body that feels so yummy to me is X or Y or Z. And you sharing what you really enjoy, things that you really enjoy in terms of how to touch your partner. And one thing I would really like more of, and maybe it's something that your partner already does, or maybe it's something that they never do, and maybe they've thought for some reason that you don't like it or you don't like it anymore, or maybe they were doing it wrong and they didn't feel very competent, and so they've stopped doing it. So one thing I would like more of is this. Do you feel like you could do more of that? Or is there some reason why that feels hard? So again, bringing curiosity to this conversation is going to be super helpful. One of my favorite sexual experiences with you, I love when couples talk about this, because you learn a lot about somebody, even if they're different experiences. When we were in Hawaii and it was really warm and I didn't feel cold and I didn't feel like I had to have a lot of layers, and it was just so fun to watch you take your clothes off, or whatever it is, you learn about what that person likes and what's helpful to them. And that can sometimes feed conversations about changes that you might want to make. So you want to be really specific. What I liked about that experience was these 2 or 3 things. And one thing I'm going to commit to doing more of in the future, one thing that I know you like or that would be helpful, and maybe it's as simple as, one thing I'm going to commit to doing more of in the future is speaking up when I want you to do something different. Maybe I'm somebody who's super quiet when we're sexual. It's so hard for me to ask for what I want different. But that can be so helpful when we ask for, actually, could you do that even slower? Or could you put more pressure in that area? That would feel really great. So if we can commit to our partner, I think this would help us have a better experience. Or I can commit to doing this because I know that you like it and I know I could do more of it. That can often help make you feel closer and feel like what each of you wants really important. And then one thing you could do that would help me is getting the room ready before we walk in, or running a bath for me. That would be really sweet. Or lighting a candle, or just checking in with me and saying, do you like this, or do you want something different, or who knows what it might be. So those kinds of conversations are great. Sometimes couples can have them on their own. Sometimes they need help with those conversations. And then in terms of emotional intimacy, just a reminder that not letting Parkinson's take up all of your time and all of the conversations that you have. For many folks, that's not true, but for those who have more advanced disease, it can happen that way. So having fun together, not just appointments and responsibilities, talking about things that you're really excited about, or you're looking forward to, or you're really enjoying in your life. Sometimes couples don't talk about that. It seems simple, but just doing that, I know a husband and I do that sometimes, is we'll say, something that I'm loving right now in my life is X. And something that's really hard for me right now is Y. And so just sharing those things creates a little intimacy, because I might not have known that my partner is struggling with that issue. And by them saying, yeah, this is a place that's hard for me right now, it helps me know them better. And that's what we want. Taking technology breaks, as you all know, we can get so caught up in our iPads and our phones and TV and all of that. And so just saying, tonight, you know what, at 7:00, we're going to turn everything off and just talk, or just play a game, or take a walk, or whatever it might be. That promotes intimacy for sure. Using appreciations frequently. The ideal ratio is like 10-1, like 10 positive things to every one negative thing that you say to your partner. This is based on some research that was done by the Gottmans, who did a lot of research on couples. And what they found were the couples that were successful and close and connected offered each other a lot of specific appreciations. And there was minimal criticism or complaints about things. So just be aware of that. How much does your negativity feed into your relationship? And can you up the ratio of how many positive things you say versus negative things? And then remembering to empty your frustration and anger tank periodically. This is sort of that well inside each of us, that sort of when we get frustrated, we maybe don't express it. When we get angry, maybe we don't express it, but it's there. And then something else happens and we get more frustrated, but maybe we don't express it. And then we get more frustrated, or we're living with somebody with a chronic disease, and little things we try to let slide, which can be great, except at some point, sometimes the tank gets filled inside, and then they do one thing and we explode. So what we have to be aware of is internally, how much resentment is in there, how much anger is accrued over time, and what can we do? What are ways that we can just sort of let some of that go? Maybe it's talking to a therapist, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's talking to friends and just saying, this is so annoying, and we just need to, let it go. So that's another thing that we need to just stay on top of in order to build that emotional intimacy. Okay, I realize I'm rushing now because I want to make sure I get through as much of this as we can and also have time for questions. But I have a few more slides that feel really important. And this one is about role changes. I said a little bit about that at the beginning, and I just want to let you know that being sensitive to how that patient care partner dynamic is affecting your sexual relationship in particular is very important. And to take breaks from that role as best you can. When I say take breaks, what I'm literally meaning is, if you can, when you're having a sensual or sexual interaction, to try to let go of patient, if you possibly can, let go of that. You're not the person who's trying to be caretaking. You're not the person who has a lot of issues. You're just you. You're just Mary. You're just John. You're just whoever. And so to try to come back to just who you are, with whatever challenges are going to show up, but you're just sort of taking that role of, I'm not a patient in this moment. I'm not this person who's very concerned about your health. I'm just Sheila. I'm just here, and I'm just showing up, and I just want you to show up as a person. That's what I'm talking about. And then also kind of how we make that transition of taking off the role is what helps us get into lover energy. What helps us get into, I just want to be with you. I just want to be close with you. However that looks, there's not an agenda. I just want to be connected and close. That's really what most of us want. Sometimes that happens through sexuality. Sometimes it happens through sensuality. Sometimes it happens through an emotional connecting conversation. So being open to all the ways that that can happen. And then a little bit about desire. So particularly with people who have Parkinson's, desire can be challenging because when we feel stressed, when we feel depressed, when we feel anxious or self-critical, overwhelmed, exhausted, all of these are real and meaningful barriers to sex. They just are. And so what we have to realize is that activating our desire often isn't a switch like I talked about. It's more like preheating an oven. It's more of little bits of kindling, little bits of things that help me get ready for an interaction. So I gave you that list of bridging things, but it's also once you actually get into bed or wherever you're going to be sexual, it's also noticing that touching genitals right away is like flipping a switch. It's too much, sometimes too soon. And so just kissing and holding one's face and looking into each other's eyes and touching the extremities of our bodies, you know, our arms, our legs, a foot rub, our chest, around our breasts, but not our nipples, you know, like all of that, touching our body so that we can, it helps us land in our bodies, but it also helps us just feel like open and interested in moving forward sometimes. Some people, they don't need that. They don't need preheating. They are a switch. And so you can touch their genitals right away. It's good to know what's your partner like. It's to have that conversation and say, are you more of a flip the switch kind of person, or are you more of a preheating kind of person? And if you're somebody who needs preheating, what does that look like? Like, what are some things that helps you feel more interested and helps you get aroused slowly, but builds that for you? That's another great conversation. And then just knowing that desire doesn't just happen spontaneously, that it often is in response to something. So at the top of this circular thing that I have here, it says decision to have sex or a willingness to be receptive is maybe where you start. It's a decision. It's a cognitive thing, and it's just a willingness. My heart says, yeah, I'm not super turned on at this moment. But then I get the sensations of my partner's touch. And then I notice, oh, as they touch me, now I'm sort of getting a little aroused. So I didn't feel aroused initially, and I didn't have desire to be sexual initially, but I just had a decision of, I want to feel close to my partner. So let's just see where we can go here. So I was a yes to start with. And after having some touch and feeling some awareness, then the desire starts. Desire often follows arousal, and that's something really important to remember. And then there's those sort of physical and emotional payoffs that then prompt us to want to start again some other time. So desire kicks in once we start. For many people, it isn't there at the beginning. And you need to ask yourself the question, what would help me have a willingness to begin? What do I need to even start? And then looking for what you're a yes to, not what you're a no to. I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. What do you want to do? I want us to just be naked and hold each other, and don't even move your hands around my body. Just hold me. That sounds really great. Or I just want to sit in the bathtub with you. Let's just start there. What are you a yes to is a really great question. Remember, you have other people who you can go to as resources. Your doctor can give you some input, your neurologist. If you're having a medication issue, if you're having some physical feelings or symptoms that you are wanting some clarity on, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, even a social worker, all of these people, hopefully you have access to either in person or online, and they can give you some suggestions. They often won't bring sexuality up, but they're willing to talk about it. They're willing to have that conversation with you, and you may need to bring that up. So I just want to use this as my last slide as sort of a summary of what I've been talking about, which is begin with a conversation, begin with that courage, that bravery that I was describing of being able to have a conversation and say, this is what I'm experiencing. This is where I'm feeling a little insecure or worried. What's happening for you? Let's talk about this. Expanding your definition, seeing it as a buffet, what's on our menu, and then just mostly being focused on not any particular goal other than feeling connected and pleasure with your partner. It's not about function. It's not about performance. It's about, at the end of our time, regardless of what we do we feel connected? Did we have some fun? Do we feel closer? And prioritize emotional intimacy. All right, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silver. There's so much great advice to unpack, like planning those intimate times when someone has their best on period, scheduling times for intimacy, and having sensitive conversations with a sense of curiosity rather than coming to the conversation with a list of complaints. We're now going to launch right into some questions that have been submitted. We had quite a few people asking if dopamine causes a person to be more sexually aroused. One person said, since starting on their Parkinson's medications, it seems that they're more aroused than ever before.
Yes, that's a very normal experience for Parkinson's patients to feel once they get on that medication. And it can even create some impulsivity in terms of wanting to be sexual more, or even wanting to shop more or gamble more, or any of those kinds of things. So it's an important thing to sort of judge of, is this an okay amount of increased desire, or is this something that's way too much for my partner, and it's a conversation I need to have with my neurologist.
Thank you. Are there any drug interactions that you know of with Viagra or any other Parkinson's medications?
Other than this notion of starting your taking it earlier in the day than maybe even your neurologist is aware of. This is something that sometimes gets talked about at Parkinson's conferences, but doesn't get talked about. Sometimes it doesn't, not all neurologists are aware of this. So if they would tell a normal, healthy, non-Parkinson's patient to take it half an hour ahead of time, for sure a Parkinson's patient would need to take it maybe double that or more. Yeah.
Okay. Someone asked if they wanted to get more information and help, what professionals should they consider contacting?
They should definitely reach out to sex therapists or sexologists, and I'm sure that they could Google that in their area. Ideally, it's great to meet with those folks in person, but if you can't, doing it online. There in the United States here, we have the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and so that's a great organization. I don't know if those folks will see folks in Canada, I'm not sure, but you may have something comparable in Canada.
Yes, and we'll be sure to send those links out as well after the webinar. Someone asked if there's any books on sexuality that you'd recommend to a person who has Parkinson's. And just a reminder that anything that's mentioned is going to be included in the email that we'll send you.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of my favorite books is called Sexual Intelligence by Marty Klein. It's not specifically for Parkinson's patients, but what I love about that book, and it's not a new book, so it should be easy to find, is he really talks about the importance that I was talking about today, of not being focused on a particular goal, but just being open to redefining sex and how that might be for you. So I love that book, Sexual Intelligence by Marty Klein. Naked at Our Age is another great book for folks who are older, by Joan Price. And that's also a great book in terms of understanding the changes and the things that happen and the adjustments we need to make as we age, and sexuality. And then the last book that I would mention that I just love, again, that's not specifically for Parkinson's patients, but is great on this topic of desire. So if you have a specific interest in that, I would look for the book, Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. Great book.
Thank you. Someone else asked, what can they do for leg cramping during intercourse?
Right. So that is something that shows up and is not uncommon for Parkinson's patients. And it can be obviously super distracting and very hard. And so what I think this is a good example of is that notion of the menu and the buffet. If there's things that you could do instead, that might be, it might be the particular position you're in. And so to give those body muscles a break and doing something else, and then come back to what you were doing might be the very best thing. Sometimes leg cramps can be just so distracting that you're like, okay, we need to pause, and that's okay. That there's a thing about arousal where you can take pauses and you can take breaks and your arousal goes down, but it comes right back. That's what's so lovely. And it may not come back as strongly, but that's okay. You're not focused on any particular goal. You're just focused on being close and connected and together. And ideally, there's no time limit, but if there is a time limit, it's okay. We only have 15 minutes. We had a leg cramp. Guess that's what's going to be for today. And it's all right. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Someone asked if Parkinson's can prevent ejaculation.
Yeah, so I mentioned that earlier, that Parkinson's is a neurological disease. And so it's going to affect ejaculation, orgasm, erections, like a million things. And so, yeah, I absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Someone asked, as their partner's dementia progresses, how does one manage the role of a caregiver, remaining loving, yet still manage to have personal boundaries?
Great question. So for sure, when you're dealing with dementia, you need, as the partner, a lot of breaks. And so you need to be super aware of, are you getting enough support? Are there more people that perhaps could give you breaks? Because it goes back to that anger and frustration tank that I was talking about earlier, that it's just so challenging. And that it's just what's true for them. But you trying to be as patient as you can and to set the boundaries that you need to set and say, yeah, this isn't what I want to do, and have counter offers. I'm not willing to do that, but I am willing to do this. That also can be helpful in setting boundaries, of standing by what you're not willing to do, but to say, but I would love to hold you or hold hands with you, or whatever boundaries you need to set.
Yeah, and a follow-up to that is, someone else asked, how would you deal with a situation where a partner is using sex as a currency?
Great question. So yeah, I guess I'd want to talk to that person more so that I'm really clear on what they mean by currency, because I've seen it show up in some different ways. Do you know any more about what they mean by that?
I don't, but I'm just wondering if perhaps they mean that if they're angry or unhappy about something, that they would withhold those intimate connections, perhaps.
Yeah, I think what's important, it comes back to communication. I think if there's a difficulty in the relationship, that needs to get talked about, or you need a couples counselor or a therapist, someone who's going to help support that couple in navigating whatever the issues are, so that sex isn't being used in that way. Because I certainly have seen that, where people, withhold affection or sexuality because they're mad and they're upset. And so to me, what needs to really get addressed is those feelings. So either with the couple talking about that and trying to work things through, or getting some support and help with that.
Yeah. Thank you. There's two more quick questions. Number one, is there a medication for women similar to Viagra?
No, there is not. And basically, all of a woman's vulva and all those tissues in her vulva area are all erectile tissue. They're basically all tissues that can get engorged. And so basically what women need to learn about in terms of their own bodies is what helps them feel more aroused. What kind of touch do they need? For some people, it's using a vibrator is helpful. For other people, it's just slow massage or stroking of one sort or another. So and realizing that it takes a while for those tissues to get engorged. Our bodies are not like men's in that they don't get aroused quickly and instantly. And so to allow that process to take all the time it needs. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And lastly, what if a person with Parkinson's has an indwelling catheter? How could that be navigated?
I don't know a ton about that. So that would certainly be something that I would have a frank conversation either with a urologist or the neurologist and get some help. An occupational therapist might be helpful as well to figure out how to navigate that so that there's no pain, because you really want to avoid pain when you're trying to be sexual. You want to have the things on your buffet that are enjoyable and pleasurable and connecting. So if something's causing discomfort or pain, I would get some support and help and figure out what can be managed around that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have today for questions. Thank you to everyone for such great questions, and a very special thank you to Dr. Silver for joining us to discuss a topic that many people find difficult to broach. In about a week or two, everyone's going to receive a follow-up email with a link to a recording of the webinar and any resources or links mentioned here today, including a recent Parkinson Canada blog post on the subject. As April is Parkinson's Awareness Month, I'm excited to share that we'll be hosting a second webinar on Thursday, April 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Hosted by our President and CEO, Dr. Karen Lee, attendees will get a deeper look at Parkinson Canada's work across our available programs and services, our research partnerships, and our work to raise the voice of Canadians impacted by Parkinson's at a national level. So stay tuned for an email invitation, which will be coming soon. I also hope that you'll join us for our May education webinar, Going Concerns, Constipation and Urinary Incontinence, taking place on Wednesday, May 17th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Watch your email inboxes for more details and the registration link. On behalf of all of us at Parkinson Canada, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See you next month.